So without further ado, Michael Gossman from Althea.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this training session. I'm not used to using a microphone, so bear with me. As you said, I am with Althea US. We're located just north of Nashville, Tennessee. We're a multi-modality company dealing in third-party parts, X-ray, CT, MRI, and recently, in the past year and a half, contrast injectors. Today, we're going to be talking about basic preventive maintenance procedures for contrast injectors. Again, like I said, my name is Michael Gossman. I train contrast injectors. I'm very passionate about it. A little bit about my background. I have been in the healthcare industry for going on almost 30 years now. I started off in the U.S. Army at UC also Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center in Aurora, Colorado, where I went, as a biomed. I did biomed in the Army for just over 12 years. And then I left the Army, did a little bit imaging work, worked for a company out of Augusta, Georgia, refurbishing the old single slice CTs back in the, oh gosh, when was that? 2004, 2005 time frame, just when multi-slice CTs were just coming out. So I've been around the world, not world, but around the healthcare industry for 30 years. I've seen a lot. And several years back, I was presented with an opportunity to create a training program for contrast injectors. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I've probably trained close to 550 biomed technicians over the past 7-8 years. I have been dealing specifically in injectors for about 15 years now. I've seen a lot of issues with them. I've seen almost just about everything and solved almost all the problems. But one thing about preventive maintenance and contrast injectors that there's always this fear about injectors. Dealing with the high pressures and everything and all the liability and so on and so forth. So this education is to give you an idea of what's actually involved with the injectors and how a program, an in-house program or third-party program can help cost savings and patient satisfaction in the hospital. So with a little bit of background of what an injector, what it takes to maintain an injector, you can decide for yourself whether the program, in-house program, is going to be right for your organization. So the in-house injector program, what are some of the advantages of the in-house injector program? One advantage is if it's under contract with another company or the OEM, you make that phone call when something goes down. So, we all are biomed here, right? Everybody's in biomed imaging of some sort, right? So when do you get most of your phone calls? Night, okay. Or, well, you can have the machine now, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going home, or it doesn't even boot up, it's 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, saying, my injector won't turn on. And then that's when you have that problem. So if it's under contract, who are you gonna call? Well, you call who it's under contract with. So let's say that call comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning. You get up to 8:15, you find out what's going on, you make that phone call to your service provider. And how quickly do you get a response from them? 30 minutes, hour, couple hours, okay? Meanwhile, with that injector down, they're calling that CT down also, right? Okay, so when the injector goes down, the CT goes down. It's like a car tire. When one tire goes flat, nothing moves, right? So when that injector goes down, the CT goes down, and how many exams do they do in a CT in an hour? 4 or 5? They push them through, right? When I was working at Norfolk General, they had them lined up down the hallway, and they had 3 CTs running 24/7. They were lined up down the hallway. So what does that create? A loss of revenue. Meanwhile, you're waiting for the service provider to get back to you just to find out when they can show up. Meanwhile, that CT's down. Now they have to start to reschedule patients, right? Because the director's gonna ask you, say, when's it gonna be up? I'm waiting for our service provider to tell me when they're gonna get here, and then I'll give you an update. So I guess it's gonna be down all day. You don't have an answer for, right? Okay. If you had an in-house program, you're there in 15, 20 minutes. Most repairs on injectors take less than 90 minutes. That's from the call to back up and running. We'll get into that a little bit more. But most repairs take less than 90 minutes because no parts are involved. Even if you have to order a part, you can tell the director, I need to order this part, it'll be here tomorrow morning at 8:30. Okay, so I'm down for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, yes, but I expect you to be up by 10 o'clock. Okay, I'll start scheduling after 10 o'clock. Because let's face it, everything, the only thing that the director really wants to know, when's it gonna be fixed? They really don't care too much about the details. When's it gonna be fixed? Well, I'm still waiting for our service provider to call me back. You don't want that answer. So immediate response to the customer needs. And who's our customer? Ultimately, the patient. So now you just drove 2.5 hours in some remote areas to have a CT done. I'm sorry, our injector's down. We'll have to reschedule you. That never helps the patient, does it? So if you're an imaging center, what are they going to do? Go down the road to another imaging center and say, can I get my CT done now? Here's my doctor's orders. Oh yeah, sure, come on in. So that imaging center just lost business, right? Then you have the hospital, with their patients. They normally do in-house patients in the evening. So everything gets all out of kibosh just because a simple injector is down because the sensor needs cleaning and no one knows how to do it. It's just that simple. So if you think an injector program is good for your organization, let's talk about training. This is educational, so I'm not going to elaborate on a whole lot. But let's look at education. Let's look at training. Is PM good to know for an injector? Well, basically, any injector is good to know. I mean, any training is good to know for an injector, right? But do you just want to know PM? Or do you want to know how it works? Do you want to know the theory behind it? Do you want to know exactly what it's supposed to do? Or you just want to go through checkbox? Yep. What do you want your program to do? Well, if you can invest in a program for injectors, invest in it wisely. Injectors are more than just PM. That's great. 2 hours out of the year. What's going to happen the other 365 days? Do you know how much the OEM costs to come in and work on your injector? One company charges $550 an hour. It's more than what it costs to work on the CT. And to get them in after hours, $750 an hour. And that includes travel. So if they're traveling 2 hours, it's automatically $2,000 because he has to get there and get back. You have a tech on call most of the hospitals, right? They're trained, they go in, boom, fixed in 90 minutes. So select a training program that provides the whole picture. Not only how to do a PM, but what it does, how it operates, what's the theory behind it. PMs are great, but when the customer asks you, my auto load's not working properly, my auto retract's not working properly, you know what you're talking about. Oh, just go in and change that setting. Someone went in there, turned that off. Let me turn it back on. See, it's working fine. So training is very, very important. And yes, Althea US does provide a training program that covers everything, and I'm the instructor. Enough said on that. So what is the cost of an in-house injection program? Well, you have the training up front first, right? Where do you get your parts from? That's another one. Do you buy from the OEM? You can. That's not a problem. Most OEMs will sell to you, except, well, I'll say most. Some of them won't. But the actual cost, we have saved some companies over $1 million a year with an injector program. Okay? Now that's just upfront costs. Let's look at the cost with the patient side of it, with the scheduling side of it, right? You have more uptime for your injector, which means more uptime for your modality, right? If you don't have to reschedule patients, that saves time and labor on the scheduling side, right? And now you're gonna save even more money by not having to reschedule everybody and then juggle scheduling around. Look at the employees. Well, the CT's down, I'm not gonna need you, John, you go home now, okay? We get so much of that, John's gonna go home someplace else, right? Okay, so there's a lot of unseen savings in having an in-house injector program. And I hear from the managers, well, you know, so much liability, and I never looked at that as a cost savings. You know, it's just never been on my radar before. Take a look at it. How much are you spending on injectors? Maybe an in-house program is what you need. Are we waiting for the OEM to show up at their time frame? I mean, I just came back from, was it Phoenix? Yeah, we call the OEM and it can take anywhere to 5 to 8 days to show up. Well, what they're doing is they're cutting down less on service technicians in the field and doing full component replacements. They won't tear the head apart, they'll just put a new head on when they get there. Even if you are under contract, well, just, you know, in Nashville, our closest Bear Tech, our service engineer, is an hour and a half north in Bowling Green. Okay, so, and that's for Nashville. So the costs, you have to look at the cost and all the unforeseen costs. You know, uptime on an injector is uptime for the CT, is revenue for the hospital, and customer satisfaction. Okay, so if you're going to do the job, let's have the right tools to do the job, right? You don't want to change a flat tire without a lug nut wrench, right? Or the right size one. So invest in the right tools. And I hear again from managers, why do we have to buy your kit? Well, you don't have to buy my kit. I put this together from a technician side of what I needed when I was working on injectors. I know that this blue handle right here, let's see if I can do it. That's a 6mm Allen. That's for tightening up the knuckle on the stomach. I designed this for, who's been in the business less than 3, 4 months, 6 months? You? No. It's with a poor biomed who was hired in September and they get called on Christmas and New Year's. We've all been there, right? Right? And they get that injector call saying that the head won't stay tilted right. Well, you have the right kit. He has the right tool. She has the right tool. Ratchet down a couple times. Good to go. The right tool. Instead of trying to find a 6mm and trying to get in that little hole to do the business. Okay. So the right tools to do the job right. Any job is easy when you have the right tools, right? Information is useful when you know where to find it, right? And that's what we were taught in these videos. Okay. How do you find the information that you need? That's what we were taught. We weren't taught on every single equipment we could be, but we knew how to research it and find what we needed to know. Same thing with tools. Right tools for the right job. And in the kit, oh, sorry. I am not going backwards. There we go. Okay. So you have your gauges, your different adapters, your different test jigs, timer, different specific tools for what you need, different lubrications, different test jigs, different cables, and everything is stored. Again, this is the stuff that I put together that I needed when I was doing injectors. When I had an injector call, I picked up the bag and I went off. This is what I designed this from a technician for the technician. So what is preventive maintenance? Anybody? Go ahead, read it if you want to. Preventive maintenance is the regular and routine maintenance of equipment and assets in order to keep them running and prevent any costly, unplanned downtime from unexpected equipment failure. A successful maintenance strategy requires planning and scheduling maintenance of equipment before a problem occurs. Okay? So how important is preventive maintenance on an injector? Who checks the tire temperature, tire pressure before you go on a trip? Who checks the oil regularly? Who changes the windshield wipers, right? Who checks the tread on their tires? That's all preventive maintenance. Who changes their own oil? Do you change the oil filter too? Why? Does it require it? It's part of the job, exactly. You don't go to Jiffy Lube and say, just change the oil, don't worry about the filter. No, you go to Jiffy Lube and say, I need an oil change and filter. Okay, you have it. You get the filter. So what is the filter? Somewhat form of a gasket, right? Okay. It's a filter, but it does have a gasket on it. So you do preventive maintenance on your own vehicle, right? Even though if you take it to someplace else, you still say, check this for me. Or even, you know, why do they have a 4,500 mile checkup on, was it Harley Davidson? It's like 1,000 miles, 3,000 miles, 6,000 miles, 6,000, 2,000. You know, they have their checks. So you take it to the dealership and they go through your car. Even though you're not doing it, you're still having preventive maintenance checked. What happens if you don't check the air on your tires and you go on a 1,000-mile trip and you're running maybe, let's say, 15 psi low? That tire's going to heat up and it could blow. Now you're sitting on the side of the road. So did you do your preventive maintenance? No, you did not. And where did it end up? On the side of the road. Same thing goes with injectors. I hear it all the time and I see it when I'm out there working on injectors. And I say in my training, are you doing the best you can do with the information you have? And they all say yes, but I also know that they go to their manager and say, these injectors are due. And what do? Well, do the best you can on them. And they normally just run, excuse me, is everything working on your injector okay? You know, and what do we call it, licky sticky, something like that. But that's what the attitude is out there sometimes, is I don't know anything about this. I'm not even quite sure what I'm supposed to do. And usually who gets this job? The low person on the totem pole, because it's all been passed down. Because nobody really knows what to do with them. And they're not under contract because they don't break that often. So it just gets passed down the chain, and that poor person on the end said, well, what am I supposed to do? And then something, just go ahead and take it up. And that's what they do. That's not a successful maintenance strategy. A good PM on an injector, that injector will run well. Oh, the other thing is, do you guys wash your cars? Yeah, you all wash your cars, right? You like a neat, clean car, right? You like to have it show off, car, truck, or whatever, right? Same thing goes with injectors. A clean injector looks good. Preventive maintenance kits, to use or not to use. Well, what's in a PM kit? That's all subjective to who you buy them from. If you buy them from the OEM, not all OEMs have a PM kit for their injectors. One does, and I'll show it to you. Other companies put out PM kits. Well, how do they know what to put in a PM kit? Well, some of them don't, okay? Some of them put stuff in that doesn't make any sense. Why do I need this? So I go back to where I was a technician and I had a corner full of unused power cables, and all nice, neat in the bag. I had another pile of knobs, all nice, neat in a bag. I never used them. Didn't have to. They were broken. I inspected them. They were fine. And if I needed one, yeah, I had it, that's fine, but how many CT techs, MR techs actually use knobs? 0. They got buttons. Why should I not have a knob when I have buttons? Right? They don't use them. You find that it's hairline crack, you order a set. Simple as that. So PM kits. What comes in the PM kits? Usually gaskets. Gaskets are very, very important. You have to have the right gaskets also, not just a gasket to put on there because it fits. There's a reason why they do what they do. OEM PM kits, let's see, one manufacturer puts out one for the Stellant, and then there's no other PM kits out there. There's for the OptiVantage, there should be something called a gasket kit. It's not a PM kit, but it's a gasket kit that we put together for you to use. There's other ones out there too. Other companies say, oh, we don't sell enough of them in stock. Okay, but to do a PM, you have to inspect these gaskets. If they're bad, what are you going to do out in the field? What do I do? It's bad. They just put it back together, let somebody else worry about it next year? Probably yes. Unfortunately, that's what happens. But the gaskets are there for a reason. So you replace them. And you find a company that provides these gasket kits. Aftermarket PM kits. Ensure gaskets meet OEM specifications. I have seen a number of gaskets come through our depot repair that I'm thinking, where have they gotten these things from? These gaskets are EMI gaskets. Do we know what that is? Electromagnetic interference. The little O-ring that you see there, it's EMI. That means if you put a meter on there, there's conductivity on it. It's carbon filled, okay, impregnated rubber. They're not as strong as a regular O-ring, but there's carbon in there. One gasket, I'll show you in a second, uses a silver yarn over foam for the gasket. Try to find that. It's difficult. And other companies don't use it, they use something far cheaper that is not working the way it's supposed to work. We've actually had issues with some of these aftermarket gaskets shorting out the CPU board and causing intermittent 311 errors. So it's important, if you do your research, make your phone calls, are your gaskets OEM quality and meet specifications? Ask that question. Just because another company is selling a full Stellant kit for $125 and we sell ours for $370, are they the same? Compare. Ask those questions. Does your gaskets meet OEM specs? Are they EMI gaskets? Believe it or not, almost every gasket out there on these injectors are EMI gaskets, including the all bears, assist, rebays, the EMI gaskets, and the EMI gaskets for a reason. Does it include all the gaskets you need? How do you know if you need them? And they don't buy those kits for like transmissions or whatever. They come with all kinds of different spare parts and everything that you use if you need, don't use if you need. You know, it comes with multiple kits, right? One kit for multiple applications, okay? And I found that with carburetors when I was rebuilding carburetors back in the day. It's like, I don't think I need that. I'm not going to touch that. So make sure it has all the gaskets you need. What is included in your PM kit? Send me a picture of what's in your PM kit. Ask those questions. You're paying good money for it, especially the Stellant. So you want to get your money's worth. So here's the OEM Stellant PM kit. So you have a heat maintainer. Okay, does it require any tools to put in the injector? No, it plugs in. Who should be buying that? User. So, but it comes with it. And here's your dual overlay gasket. Here's your knobs. Here's your optic sensor gaskets. Has anyone ever replaced those before? In 15 years, I've never replaced them. Never replaced them. But there they are, right there. So what gaskets in here? We got the plunger tip boots and we have the cap seals. So you use this gasket, plunger tip boots, cap seals. You know how much this costs? This kit? Over $1,600. Why? Because a heat maintainer is $1,400. And I had a manager call me, said, we want to do exactly what the OEM does. Not a problem. I'm going to send you a kit for free, my Stellar PA kit for free. I'm going to send it to you. I'll even pay for you to buy the bare one. Well, week later says, no comparison. Nope, there isn't. Because over here is our PM kit. Cap seal overlays. We got the LED gasket, dual overlay gasket. We have the piston boots, lower piston boots, the plunger tip boots, knuckle gasket. This little, let's see, that is your cover gasket. This is your lens seal gasket. And this is your top end gasket. It's the gasket that goes around the silver part of the stomach. It took me 2.5 months to get this part number from there. 2.5 months to order it from there. Because they had no idea what that part number is. You know why? They don't sell it. They don't sell it. That's one of the gaskets you will use quite a bit. Because when you put the covers back on, it usually damages that gasket. They don't sell it. And they only sell it in 1 meter lengths at things like $75 a meter. So in comparison to the OEM PM kit and a Stellar PM kit, Stellar PM kit, big difference in the gaskets, big difference. And ours is only $370. Now, there's other ones out there, I don't care what you buy, okay? The bottom line, look at the money. This is what they're selling you, even when you have a contract. Do they change all this stuff out? No. No, you're gonna be lucky if Bear even cracks the case. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. So here's another third-party gasket. This is the one I have no idea. This is the OEM, and this is what else somebody else is selling out there. Is that what you want? You want OEM quality, right? So when you do your PM, if you go with an in-house program, verify what you're getting for the money. That's the bottom line. This gasket right here is not the silver yarn. It is fabric over foam, but it's the wrong fabric. It's a weave. Okay, it's a metal weave. It does not absorb anything. The contrast and saline will just run right onto that and go right onto your CPU board. Okay. This gasket with the nylon, with a silver nylon, is an open weave with foam under it to absorb that contrast and that saline. That's what it does. If contrast and saline gets in there, of course you have to replace it because it's no longer doing a gasket's job, especially with contrast. It becomes hard. Calibrations. Calibrations can only be done by the OEM. Who believes that? A lot of managers do. Oh, well, does your program provide calibrations? Okay, if we do this in-house, can we do the calibrations? Well, what I have found over the past 15 years working on injectors, that if the calibration is off, it is a component failure. What I mean by component failure, let's take the Stellar, that's the most common one out there. The software looks at not only the load cell, but also the amperage going on the motor. So what's going to increase amperage on the motor? To give you an error. Bad motor, bad gears, right? The worm gear runs on bearings. Contrast saline gets down into the bearings, rust them out, increasing the amperage to still provide the program that you have in it. Okay, the load cell and the motor doesn't match up. The amperage on the motor doesn't match up, you get an error. Or the piston goes up and wobbles. It's not running right. It's going to give you that error. It is a component issue. It's a component failure. Can you replace most of that stuff? 75% of it, yeah. Especially if you go, rah, 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 the motor doing that, and don't do that. That's causing your problem. Get a new motor in there, you're good to go. How long does it take to replace a motor? If you're slow, an hour. If you're fast, 20, 25 minutes. Preventive maintenance steps for a contrast injector. Contact customer to schedule the PM. Talk with the customer. Record the protocol. Initial inspection. Identifiable issues before you start your PM. Operations check. Once you start, there's no going back. Cleaning inspection. Calibration verification. Final operations check. And entering the original protocol. Let's look at these. Scheduling, number one, scheduling PM service. You just can't walk up to the CT and say, I'm here to do your PM on your injector. It can take 2 to 3 weeks to schedule that. And they're going to want it done after hours or in the slowest time. So schedule enough time to complete the PM service. How long does it take to do a PM on an injector? Average time, about 2 hours. About 2 hours. About 2.5 maybe if it's dirty. And usually the customer will request PM completed during slow times with possibly 2 to 3 week lead time. Why do they need a 2 to 3 week lead time? Scheduling service, scheduling. They're going to block off a section for you. I usually got the 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Oh, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. That's their slowest time. Talk with the customers. Hey, John, any issues with your injector? Well, you know, every now and then I get this. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Attempt to duplicate any issues they are having. Okay, John, show me what you were doing. Observe procedure to verify complaints. Show me what you're doing. Correct any issues prior to starting the PM. Now, why would we want to do that? It's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. But what do I mean by that? Do a quick inspection of the injector prior to your PM. Do you need a new head cable? Is there something that you need that's not included in the PM kit? Okay. Is everything operating okay? Do we have any issues with the injector at all? Okay. Correct those, because it's no fun going in to do a PM and finding problems that you can't correct. Now, if you know if it's dirty, that's fine. You're going to correct that. So record the original protocol. Always record the current protocol on injector so you can return it to the original state. Why would we want to do that? Why can't we just leave it the way it is when we get done with the injector? Some techs will not recognize the program that you have or the protocol that you have on there as a test protocol. They may inadvertently use it on a patient. Some other techs have no idea how to change that protocol, and all they do is push a button on the injector. You throw them a curveball, they won't know what to do. So leave it exactly the way you found it. Initial inspection. This piggybacks on what I said before. Is the system safe to use? You walk in there, you look at it, and it's like hanging on the counterboard assembly. No, the system's not safe to use. Cut cables, cable connections, head mount, overhead mount. Physical damage. Repair damage, order needed parts prior to starting the PM. Be ready for what you're coming up against. Because if you go in there and you shut the system down because you found something, they're not going to be happy with you. So be very, very proactive on what you're doing with these, especially the Stealth. The OptiVantage is another CT1, and the CTA is a CT1. So this is some of the things that we have found when these things get sent into us for They don't want to do the PM themselves, so they send them in to us to do the PM. Broken knob, damaged head cable, cut cable, standoffs on the actual cable connector, missing. And they wonder why they get intermittent errors. No lie, no lie. I sent an injector up to Canada. He said, my loader's not working. And he sent his in back for repair, and found half the standoffs were missing. Cut overlay, another damaged cable, head cable. These are all visibly identifiable stuff. So take a walkthrough through it. Okay, looks good, looks good. Just a visual inspection. I'm going to need to order head cable. I'm going to need to order the overlay assembly. I'm going to need to order this. Okay, you're in there. There's no sense of getting in there and find out you need to replace these because you just torn everything apart, have to put it back together. You're going to have to tear everything apart again to put the new parts on. And you've done this at the beginning of the month. You're ready to go the next week. Operations check. Once you get started, there's no going back. So you run an operations check on any injector. You run a simple operations check with your syringes. You do everything like the customer would do. In the bare manual for the Stellan, it actually has a protocol in there, and it tells you what to run. I tell my techs, you snap the syringes in there, do the auto advance, do the auto fill, you do the prime, you do everything just like the customer's going to do it. And then you can try to identify any issues, because once you get started, once you crack that case and you go back to John or Mary and say, did you know this was doing that? Oh, no, nope, never happened to me. Nope, never happened. You must have done it. Whereas if you did an operations check, you would find that the fill B side was not working. But you must have done something to it, because it was working fine. But they didn't tell you to ran the injector to the other cabinet, corner cabinet, and busted that button out. Oh, never happened. So now you have to fix it, because you broke it. You didn't, but you didn't do an operations check to find out. Check all functions: auto advance, auto fill, auto retract. Verify injection completes without no issues. You're going to do that at the end also, before you hand it back to the customer. There's the protocol right there that Bear puts in for us. It's in the manual, and actually the technician is supposed to be doing this too on a daily basis. You have your A side, B side, a pause, A side, B side, and you run that injection. What it does, you see a high speed flow, low speed flow, a pause, make sure that works. Then you have a medium rate flow, and then you have a very slow flow rate. So it tests all the parameters. And if you don't have a protocol to use on other injectors, you can use the same type of protocol: fast, slow, medium, very slow, medium slow, different volumes. You're checking out the whole system. Cleaning and inspection. This will take up most of your time. Contrast intrusion is the #1 cause of injector failures. And how do we get contrast intrusion? Is it the customer always? The user? Well, typically yes. But if the PM is not done properly and you have bad gaskets, it's even more of a problem. If you have good gaskets, it's less of a problem, because the gaskets are doing their job. Gaskets: inspect, clean, replace. No manufacturer tells you have to replace gaskets. So I can't tell you have to replace gaskets. Inspect, clean, replace as needed. If you have them, you might as well replace them. You've already paid for them, so you might as well do it. It's like having a sale on oil filters. Well, I'm going to buy 10 of them, right? I think Walmart had a sale on my oil. It wasn't in the containers or whatever. It was in bulk. It was like Mobil 1 oil for like $15.97 for 12 quarts. Oh yeah, you know. I think I bought 5 of them. But that's gaskets, inspect, clean, and replace. So let's take a look at some of the stuff that I have found during PMs. You see that yellowing right there? That's contrast under the cap seal. All right up in there. See that crusty stuff? That's contrast. That's contrast that has actually turned orange from some cleaning stuff they put on it. That's what you're going to find. All that is contrast. And the contrast of sealing will actually eat away at the metal. The metal will become brittle and actually snap off. All that white in there is contrast. Even down in there, you can see contrast. That's what a good PM does. That's what it gets rid of. There's another one, contrast. All that white, that's contrast up under the seals. That's why you get those cap seals in your PM kit, because they're very, very difficult to take off. There's a trick to it, but they're difficult to take off. That's just on the sealant. That's all contrast. That's on one of those fancy dual overlay gaskets right there. And we actually had them bending down, like I said, hitting the CPU board and giving intermittent 311 errors. That's a real good gasket there, wouldn't you say? Well, lack of maintenance on this guy. Who's dealt with the CVI injector? Anybody? That's the contrast sensor right there. And they complain that it doesn't always recognize contrast being in the tubing. Well, yeah, look at it. That's all contrast. That's where cleaning comes in. This is 75% of your PM is cleaning the contrast off. Now, who's really supposed to be doing this?
User.
You're the user, correct. Is the OEM going to come in and clean that contrast off? Nope, that's not their job. Their job is to make sure it's operating properly. That's not their job. They like saying this because now they're going to come in and do repairs, but that's not their job. You pushed the wrong buttons here. That's all contrast right there, all in there. That's all contrast. Now, when you look at this stuff, when you look at these injectors, when you look at these pictures, we've all heard in being a biomed, work on the equipment as if you're going to be the next patient on that team. You look over and you see something like this on the CT. What are you going to think? Time to go someplace else. They're not maintaining their equipment. They ain't going to maintain me. Will Bear clean that up? Nope. You're going to need a new head. But it's under contract. Oh no. That's user abuse. The $12,000 head is not covered under contract. You had him. Now, is this repairable? It is. It's very repairable. You can have it looking brand new if you're doing it in-house. If you're maintaining, who better to maintain your equipment than you? That's just, I mean, I've had 5 cath labs in my life, and if I see an injector like this, I'm getting off the table and walking out. That ain't happening to me. Especially, I mean, this is actual contrast dripping down. Calibration verification. You complete the PM to meet OEM specifications. Basic verifications are flow rate. Oh wait, who's worked on infusion pumps before? Okay, this is going to sound very familiar to you. Flow rate, right? Volume, time, occlusion, pressures, and maintaining the piston calibration. Does an injector need calibration during a PM? Who does imaging? 80 kV is 80 kV, right? If it falls within specs, are you going to do recalibrate it to make sure it's even closer to specs? No, if it falls within specs, you move on. Companies like to call their PM a calibration. Oh, we calibrate it all the time. Every time they come in, we calibrate the system. No, they don't. When you schedule your PM, you're going to say, I'm going to need 2 hours. Oh, well, it only needs an hour. Okay. Just saying. So flow rate, volume, time. All this looks familiar, right? You fill up the syringes, graduated cylinder, you fill up the IV bag, you send it to the infusion pump, you go into a graduated cylinder, you see how much you have. Anything different on that? Nope, nothing's different. Nothing's different. And you have a stopwatch or something to time it, correct? Nothing's different. Occlusion. You block off your injector, your infusion pump, right? And it's supposed to include at a certain pressure at a certain time, right? Same type of deal here. There's an occlusion and there's a pressure gauge to see what it occludes at. Not much different than an IV pump. Pressure checks. There's your gauge, and we have to put some type of restriction on there to create back pressure to see what that pressure is. Not much different than an IV pump, but it is because we're dealing with a lot more pressure, a lot more volume, a lot faster flow rate, and they don't have 50 of them in the hallway or in the closet that they can pull out another one and swap out. They have one per CT, one for MR, one for cath lab. They have one. Piston calibration is 50 milliliters on the screen, 50 milliliters. There's piston calibrations for these also, which may not be for the IV pump, but there are for this one. So you have to make sure that 0 is 0 and 150 is 150 and so on and so forth. Final operation, confirm everything is operational. Same protocol as in the beginning. Final checks. So what same protocol you use at the beginning, you finish up with. And if you have no errors, you can inform the customer of what's going on and update the customer. And our original protocol, very, very important, especially in the Mark V Pro. There's one setting where you take it from a milliliter per second to a milliliter per minute. If you don't change it back, your first phone call in the morning is going to be, my injector is working, but it's running very, very slow. And then you have to tell the customer how to change the flow rate, which they've never done before because they never had to. Any questions?